Mike, thanks very much, and thanks for the mercifully low stage. I shouldn't be able to break anything coming off that. Look, it's fantastic to be here. It's a gorgeous building here at Ricoh. A little bit too much red for my liking, but outside of that, it's all very good. But look, it's very interesting actually if you think about what's happening in the modern world and the challenges that New Zealand faces, and Mike sort of alluded to that. Because in one sense, we know that we have to grow productivity in New Zealand. Ultimately, if we're going to narrow the wage gap with Australia, keep more bright young New Zealanders here, be more efficient as a country, then we just have to lift productivity. So when you look around from a government point of view, the first thing you realise is we're a really large purchaser. We spend a lot of money and we buy a lot of things. And from that, you can see how much there is in the way of opportunity if we want to invoke new technology. So let me just give you one example of that. On a very regular basis, we have prisoners which are held in Auckland but have to go for deposition hearings in Christchurch. The way that we do that is we pick them up, we put them on a plane with a couple of diplomatic protection people or corrections people. We fly them down to Christchurch, they have a 10-minute deposition hearing, and then we fly them back. That is immensely expensive for the state. And yet in the modern world, we could use technology of video conferencing, just as you've seen from your regional sales manager in Japan, to do exactly that thing. We don't need to fly people all around the country. In fact, we don't need to move them out of Mount Eden for their depositions hearing. And it's just one simple example where you start thinking about how much money we can save if we use modern technology. And in a way, that's why I want to come along this evening. Firstly, to celebrate the investment here in Wellington, which is important, for a company which is a large multinational in the top 500 in the world. But also because they are trying to deliver technology solutions that I think can make government more efficient and ultimately business more efficient. And that is incredibly important. If we don't do that, then I think we won't achieve the outcomes that we want. We'll actually spend a lot more money and not really go a lot faster. I think technology is an interesting thing. It's constantly moving and it's always challenging. It challenges your sense of whether you're making the right decision and whether you are going to get payback for what you're doing. But I actually believe unless you are prepared to take up those challenges, you'll ultimately be left behind. It's interesting actually to see what's happening out there in a lot of manufacturing operations in New Zealand. For some time, the government has actually been employing a technology which some of you will be familiar with called lean technology. And that really looks at the way that we actually process various, quite disparate actually, manufacturing operations to make them more efficient. One company I went and visited was in Hamilton. They actually make a plane, which if you know anything about planes is a bit like a Cessna Caravan. From Pacific Aviation. The plane that they make used to take about 1,200 man-hours just to produce the wing of this plane. They've now got that down through lean technology to about 650 hours. So their plane has gone from being more expensive to the Cessna Caravan to cheaper than the Cessna Caravan, and obviously they're starting to pump those planes out internationally. So I think if you look in the same way in the world that Ricoh operates, there are just a huge number of things that can happen both at the government and at the private sector level to make New Zealand more efficient and to make business more efficient and more technology friendly. And you can see that in the data processing. One thing that I've got to tell you when you become Prime Minister, most things don't shock you other than the sheer volume of paper that you get. I know why we've been having such high levels of deforestation in New Zealand. It's got nothing to do with the tax that was being put on forests. It was more to do with just giving me pieces of paper to read. It's unbelievable. So if you can get to a point where you can process that data, you can store it somewhere, you can send it where you want, you can file it, then you get to a world where you're a hell of a lot more efficient. And that's really the future of New Zealand, I think, if we can do that. I think the second thing is that that's already been raised tonight, this whole issue of being environmentally friendly, environmentally sustainable. It's very important for New Zealand, for the brand of New Zealand and the way that we're going to operate in the years to come. And I think it's getting that balance right between economic growth and caring about the environmental issues that we face. But where we can use technology to deliver those solutions, then more often than not, we can do that in a very environmentally sustainable way. And so again, I think that makes a huge amount of sense. The world is going to be very challenging. When I was in my last sort of really year or two at Merrill Lynch, I was effectively running the homogenous businesses that Merrill had, so global foreign exchange, European bonds, all of the things that we thought that the internet would basically kill us. So much so that we actually hired a guy called Michael Packer, who was the Harvard's top professor in IT. So what we got Michael to do was to come back and tell us how we could sort of disintermediate Merrill, how we could use the internet to basically beat Merrill Lynch. That was really the argument. Of course, the right answer was get a bunch of people who take way too much risk and blow the place up. They did that a few years later, but he actually came up with some sensible solutions when I was there, and really came on to say, look, technology is going to completely eliminate your business. So without getting into a long, involved technology discussion, the way they did that was they worked out very simply, actually, that we could work out if somebody was a US fund manager who was buying British shares, then, hey, we could be a very clever investment bank and provide a technology package that would allow them to buy those shares online, settle them online with Merrill Lynch, do the currency trade, then no one would be going anywhere other than Merrill to do one transaction to do a lot of different things. As it turned out, they sent me away to go away and do that, not because I was the technology expert, but because I understood the business and the way it operated. And over the course of the sort of next year, we spent a lot of money, but ultimately that all proved to be the right step to take because the world changed so dramatically. In a way, actually, I think it did, without digressing, something completely different. The real challenges that Wall Street faced were in part driven off technology, and I haven't seen any kind of economic or political commentator make that point. But it's absolutely true. We at Merrill used to make literally billions of dollars out of very simple businesses, actually, where there was a margin that operated because there wasn't transparency in the marketplace. And as soon as technology came along, it exposed that margin. That was eliminated through technology. And if investment banks wanted to continue to pay people lots of money, the only way for them to make those sort of profits was to take bigger risks. And that's exactly what Wall Street did. Developed more and more risky products, which ultimately they sold to customers, which in the end turned an investment bank into a hedge fund, and in the end, a train wreck. And so the only reason I raise that is because that is the way New Zealand is going to have to think. If we are going to recognise that we're in a highly competitive world, we're going to have better technological solutions to achieve the outcomes that make sure that we win. The only other reason why I think technology is so important is New Zealand has always suffered from the issue of tyranny of distance. The big issue for New Zealand is we've been a long way away. It's a good thing and a bad thing, but from a business point of view, it's largely been quite difficult for us. And the one thing that technology does is it removes that tyranny of distance. You're going to see the evolution of more and more weightless products and a weightless economy that allows New Zealand to compete. In a world that is more troubled and more unstable, you'll see people coming and living in New Zealand, running their business and operating in quite a seamless way. And I think that's the exciting bit about technology. So thank you, Mike, for the opportunity to be here. And I want to wish you all the very best and everyone, Rico, the best. I know it's going to be a good party tonight. I'm sorry I can't join you. I've got to fly first class, that's actually called Air New Zealand, up to Auckland this afternoon or this evening. And do some other things. But thank you for the opportunity to be here, and all the very best.